The research lab was silent, except for the low hum of machines. Outside, the city slept under a blanket of cold rain, but inside, Dr. Evelyn Cross was wide awake. Eyes red from hours of staring at a microscope were locked on the tiny crimson. Sample under the glass slide. It was just a drop of blood, ordinary to anyone else. But Evelyn knew what she saw was not ordinary. It was impossible. She leaned closer, her heart pounding, because the cells weren't behaving like human cells at all. They were feeding. And not in the way bacteria feed on nutrients, no. These cells were devouring the microscope's probe, breaking down. Metal on a molecular level, as if it were paper in a fire. She pulled back, her breath sharp. This couldn't be real. Metal-eating cells didn't exist in any known species, let alone humans. She thought it was a contamination, a lab mistake. But the blood sample had come directly from a healthy man who had come in for a routine checkup. There had been no sign of illness, no symptoms, just this hidden, silent predator flowing through his veins. And the most terrifying part? The cells seemed aware. When she adjusted the lens, they shifted together like a school of fish sensing. Movement in the water, the intercom crackled. "Dr. Krause, we've got a situation in room 3. The donor is the voice cut off suddenly, replaced by muffled shouts. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She raced out of the lab and into the brightly lit hallway, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. At the far end, nurses were clustered outside room 3. One of them was screaming for a crash cart. Inside, the donor, the man whose blood she had tested, was thrashing violently on the bed. His eyes wide, his veins darkening under his skin. Evelyn pushed through the chaos, shouting orders. "Sedate him now." But as the syringe touched his arm, the needle dissolved in seconds, the metal melting away into his skin. Gasps filled the room. His body convulsed once more, and then stillness. The heart monitor went flat. For a moment, there was only the beeping alarm. Then, something impossible happened. His chest rose again, not with air, but with a strange glow pulsing under his skin, bright enough to cast shadows on the walls. The glow spread down his arms, into his fingers, and then into the 4 lines and monitors. Every device around him began to corrode and collapse into rust and dust. Nurses backed away, terrified. Evelyn could only watch, her mind racing. The man sat up. His eyes were no longer human, they shimmered like molten gold. "It's awake," he whispered, his voice carrying an unnatural echo, before anyone could react. The lights in the entire hospital flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. When emergency lights came back on, the bed was empty. The man was gone. Only a trail of rusted metal and withered plastic marked where he had been. Evelyn stood frozen, her pulse racing. She didn't know who or what he was. She understood one thing with crystal clarity. This was not a mutation, not a disease. It was a weapon. It was alive. She hurried back to her lab, locking the door behind her. Pulling up the blood sample scans, she stared at the cellular structure. The patterns were unlike anything in the human genome, but there was something eerily familiar. A memory surfaced during her years working with classified government projects. She had seen similar molecular bonds in research files, but those files had been marked extraterrestrial origin. Her phone rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. A deep, calm voice spoke. "Dr. Cross, you need to leave the city. Now they're coming for the sample and they won't leave witnesses." The line went dead. She looked at the tiny vial of blood still on her desk, glowing faintly under the lab lights. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard sirens, but these were not police sirens. The pitch was wrong. It was alien. Evelyn realized she had just uncovered something the world was never meant to see. And now, the world might not survive what was already walking among them. The rain was heavier now, pounding against the glass walls of the lab as if the city itself was warning her to run. Dr. Evelyn Cross didn't need another warning. The voice on the phone had been enough. She slipped the glowing vial of blood into a secure case, stuffed it deep into her coat pocket, and shut down the lab systems. But the shutdown wasn't fast enough. On the corner monitor, The security feed flickered to life camera 1. Camera 2, camera 3 all, showing dark-clad figures moving through the hospital corridors. They weren't police. Their movements were too precise, too coordinated. Faces hidden under tactical helmets, rifles cradled like extensions of their arms. Evelyn's breath caught when she saw the hospital guards try to stop them. The guards didn't even have time to raise their weapons before collapsing. Their bodies twitching from some unseen force, she grabbed her laptop, jammed it into her bag, and bolted for the back exit. Her shoes squeaked against the wet floor, each step echoing too loud in her ears. In the stairwell, the fluorescent lights overhead began to pop one by one, plunging each floor into darkness as she descended. The hum of the building's generator was gone. Now whatever was chasing her was killing the power grid as easily as breathing. When she burst into the alley behind the hospital, the cold air hit her like a slap. She ran, her coat flapping behind her, the vial pressing against her ribs. Somewhere above, a strange humming sound followed her, deep and vibrating, as though the air itself was bending. She didn't dare look up. The streets were nearly empty, except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. Evelyn ducked into a narrow side street, trying to remember the map of the city in her head. If she could reach the train station, she could disappear in the crowd, but as she neared the corner, a black SUV slid silently into view, blocking her path. The windows were tinted, but she felt eyes on her cold, measuring. The back door opened. A man stepped out, dressed in a suit that seemed out of place in the pouring rain. His skin was pale, his hair slicked back, his smile thin and deliberate. "Dr. Cross," he said calmly, "you have something that doesn't belong to you." Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "It doesn't belong to you either," she shot back, taking a step backward. The man's smile didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "We're not here to debate ownership. Hand it over, and maybe you'll live to see next week." From the shadows behind him, 2 more figures appeared. Their faces were covered, but Evelyn caught a glimpse of something under their skin brief. Flashes of gold light crawling through their veins, just like the man in room 3. Her stomach turned. They weren't entirely human anymore. Before they could close in, headlights blazed from the far end of the street. A motorcycle roared toward them, spraying water in its wake. The rider, dressed in a black leather jacket, didn't slow down. He skidded to a halt between Evelyn and the strangers, revving the engine like a challenge. "Get on," he shouted. Evelyn didn't think. She just moved. The rider grabbed her arm, pulled her onto the back of the bike, and twisted the throttle. The tires screamed against the wet asphalt, and they shot forward, leaving the suited man and his golden-veined soldiers shrinking in the distance. But even as they sped away, Evelyn looked over her shoulder and her blood ran cold. The soldiers didn't run. They didn't chase. They simply stood there watching. And then, impossibly, they began to dissolve into the rain, their bodies breaking into shimmering dust that the wind carried away. The rider leaned close so she could hear over the engine. "Name's Cade. I'm the reason you're not dead yet. But if you want to stay that way, you're going to have to trust me." Evelyn clutched the case in her pocket. She didn't trust him, not yet, but the look in his eyes told her he knew exactly what she was running from. And maybe, just maybe, he knew why that blood should not exist. The motorcycle weaved through the rain-slick streets like a shadow, its engine growling low as Cade took sharp turns without slowing. Evelyn clung to him, the cold wind biting through her coat, but her mind was a storm far louder than the rain. Every drop of water felt heavier. Every streetlight seemed to blink in warning. She had no idea who Cade was or why he had risked himself to save her. But the way he moved fast, deliberate, as if he'd done this 100 times before. He was no stranger to danger. After what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes, Cade slowed and turned into an abandoned parking garage. The place was silent except for the faint drip of water from the ceiling. They stopped near a rusted elevator door that looked like it hadn't worked in years. Without a word, Cade pulled out a small device, pressed it against a hidden panel in the wall, and the elevator doors slid open with a whisper of air. Evelyn stepped inside, her heart still racing. The ride down was longer than she expected. the air growing cooler with each passing second. Finally, the doors opened not to a basement but to a massive underground chamber lit by rows of dim golden lights. It wasn't empty. Dozens of people were here, gathered around long metal tables covered in blueprints, maps, and screens showing surveillance feeds. Some wore military gear. Others looked like scientists. All of them stopped what they were doing the moment they saw her. "That her?" a woman in a tactical vest asked, stepping forward. She had sharp eyes and a scar running across her jaw. "That's her," Cade replied. "She's got it." Evelyn felt every gaze on her, and instinctively her hand went to the vial in her pocket. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Who are you people?" The woman with the scar motioned for her to sit. "We're the ones keeping this city alive, Dr. Cross. And what you're holding isn't just dangerous, it's impossible." Evelyn shook her head. "I don't understand. I ran a DNA test on that blood. The results were wrong. Not just unusual, completely outside human biology. It's not from any animal or plant on Earth." Cade sat across from her, leaning forward. "That's because it's not from Earth." The words hung in the air like a knife. Evelyn almost laughed, but the looks on their faces told her he wasn't joking. "You're saying this blood is alien?" "Not just alien," the scarred woman said. "It's a hybrid, human and something else." "Is the man you took it from?" "He's one of them." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She remembered the golden veins under the skin, the strange hum in the air, the way the soldiers had dissolved into dust. "What do they want?" she asked quietly. Cade's voice dropped to a grim whisper. "They want to finish what they started. Years ago, this blood, it's the key to changing us. It's making us like them." Before Evelyn could speak, the lights in the chamber flickered. A warning alarm blared through the underground hideout. People scrambled to their stations, grabbing weapons and shouting orders. The scarred woman turned toward a large monitor, her face going pale. "They've found us," she said. Cade was already on his feet, pulling a handgun from his jacket and tossing a rifle to the woman. "Evelyn," he said sharply, "if you want to live, stay with me. And don't." He didn't finish, because a deafening crash shook the chamber, and the far wall exploded inward. Through the dust and fire, figures stepped into the room, tall, inhumanly still, their veins glowing gold. And this time, they weren't here to watch. They were here to take her. The blast echoed through the underground chamber like the roar of a collapsing mountain. Dust rained from the ceiling as the shock wave knocked Evelyn backward. Her ears rang, the world spinning, but through the haze she could make out their shapes tall, lean figures stepping through the broken wall, each movement eerily smooth, like they were gliding rather than walking. Their eyes glowed faintly, the same golden light that pulsed through the veins beneath their pale, stretched skin. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The air around them felt heavy, charged, as if invisible hands were pressing down on everyone in the room. "Contact," the scarred woman shouted, firing the rifle without hesitation. Bullets tore through the air, but seemed to slow the moment they neared the invaders, the metal rounds melting into nothing before they could touch them. Others in the room joined the fight, but it was like throwing stones at a storm. The hybrids moved forward, unbothered, their glowing veins brightening with every step. Cade yanked Evelyn to her feet and shoved her behind a table for cover. "Stay down," he barked, leaning out to fire at one of the intruders. His bullets didn't stop them either, but his shots were aimed at the ceiling. With a sharp crack, a heavy light fixture crashed down on one of the creatures, pinning it for just a moment before it dissolved into a spray of golden dust. Evelyn's breath caught. It's disintegrating." "They don't die like we do," Cade said, reloading. "They're not made of what we're made of." One of the hybrids suddenly vanished in a blur, reappearing right beside the scarred woman. Evelyn barely had time to blink before the soldier was slammed against the wall, her rifle clattering away. The hybrid reached for her throat, golden light crawling up its arm. Evelyn could feel the air vibrating, a deep hum that made her bones ache. She didn't think she moved. Grabbing the nearest metal pipe from the floor, she swung with all her strength. The blow landed across the hybrid's arm, and for the first time, it reacted. Its glowing veins flickered, and it released the soldier with a sharp alien hiss. Cade saw it too. Iron, shouted over the chaos. They're weak to unprocessed metals. The room erupted into a frenzy. People scrambled for pipes, tools, anything not made in a factory. The hybrids moved faster, striking down anyone they could reach, but now the resistance had teeth. Evelyn ducked under a swinging arm that shattered a table, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She spotted a crowbar lying near a fallen worker and snatched it up, the cold metal grounding her panic. The battle was brutal. Each hybrid that fell dissolved into golden mist, and each one that struck back left bodies in their wake. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and the sound of distant explosions. Explosions that weren't from them, but from above. Something was happening. On the surface, too, then Evelyn saw him. The man she had drawn the blood from the source of this nightmare stood in the breach of the broken wall. Watching the carnage with an almost bored expression, his golden veins glowed brighter than the rest, his eyes locking onto her through the chaos. A slow smile spread across his face, cold and certain. Cade noticed, too, stepping in front of her. "Go," he told her, his voice firm but quiet. Now, Evelyn hesitated. "What about you? I'll slow him down. You get to the exit tunnel and don't stop until you see daylight." She wanted to argue, but the man in the breach began to move, and Cade was already gone, charging forward, iron blade in hand. Evelyn turned and ran, the sound of metal clashing against something inhuman echoing behind her. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Evelyn's lungs burned as she burst out of the narrow tunnel into blinding daylight. For a second, she just stood there, gasping, letting the cold air sting her skin. The sudden brightness made her eyes water, but as they adjusted, her relief twisted into something colder fear. The city she had left behind that morning was gone. Smoke rose from several rooftops. Alarms wailed in the distance, joined by the uneven crack of gunfire. People were running in the streets, their faces pale and frantic, clutching bags, children, anything they could carry. She stumbled forward, scanning for a familiar street, but even the air felt wrong, thicker, heavier, carrying the faint metallic tang she had smelled in the underground lab. Then she saw them. On the far end of the road, two hybrids walked calmly down the center, their golden veins pulsing like heartbeats under their skin. They weren't in a rush, didn't need to be. People who got too close didn't even have time to scream before they were struck down, their bodies crumbling into the same golden dust Evelyn had seen before. She ducked into an alley, her chest tightening. It's already here. It's everywhere. She pressed her back to the wall, trying to think. The iron crowbar was still in her hand, slick with sweat. She had no idea where Cade was or if he was still alive. But she knew one thing. If these things had reached the city, the blood sample in her possession wasn't just dangerous. It was a weapon. The sound of boots crunching gravel made her freeze. She turned slowly, ready to swing, but stopped when she saw a young boy, maybe 12 years old, staring at her from behind a dumpster. His clothes were torn, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes were sharp. "You came from below," he said quietly. Evelyn swallowed. "How do you know that? They've been coming up from there all morning. My brother went down to stop them. He didn't come back." His voice cracked, but his gaze stayed on hers. "If you were down there and you're still breathing, you've seen what they can do. So tell me, we have a chance." Evelyn wanted to lie, to tell him yes, but the truth weighed heavier than any comfort. "Not unless we can find a way to stop them," she said. "And I think I might have the only thing that can." Before the boy could reply, a shadow fell over them. Evelyn's head snapped up. At the mouth of the alley, the man from the underground, the one with the brightest golden veins, was standing there. His smile was the same, slow and certain, but now there was something else in his eyes. Recognition. "I wondered where you'd run to," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an unnatural echo, as if two voices spoke at once. "You've touched my blood. Do you understand what that means?" Evelyn gripped the crowbar tighter. "It means you bleed like the rest of us," he chuckled, stepping closer, the light from his veins making the shadows dance on the walls. "No, it means you're already part of me." Evelyn felt the boy press against her side, trembling. Her heart pounded so loud she almost didn't hear the low rumble in the distance, like thunder but steady, growing louder. The man's smile faltered for the first time as the sound swelled, and then Evelyn saw it, a convoy of armored trucks. Tearing down the main street? Their sides marked with an unfamiliar insignia black circle with a single white slash. The hybrids on the road turned toward the vehicles, their golden glow intensifying. The man in the alley glanced over his shoulder, then back at Evelyn. "Looks like others want you to," he said softly. "But remember, no matter where you run, you can't outrun what's already inside you." And then he was gone, dissolving into a cloud of golden particles that swirled away on the wind. Evelyn didn't have time to think. The trucks were getting closer, and she didn't know if they were there to save her or to kill her. The armored trucks screeched to a stop just beyond the alley, their engines rumbling like restless beasts. Heavy boots hit the ground in unison as a dozen soldiers spilled out, each wearing matte black armor and visors that hid their faces. The insignia on their chests, a black circle with a white slash, seemed almost to absorb the light, giving them a strange, shadowed presence. Evelyn instinctively stepped back, placing the boy behind her. She didn't trust them, not after what she'd just seen. But in the chaos outside, these people looked like the only force unafraid to face the hybrids. One soldier broke formation and approached her, moving with calculated precision. When he removed his helmet, Evelyn was startled not by his face, but by his eyes. They were pale gray, almost colorless, and carried the steady weight of someone who had seen too many endings. "Evelyn Cole?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with urgency. She hesitated. "Who's asking, Captain?" "Rourke," he said. "Black Line Division. We've been tracking you for 3 days. You have something that belongs to us?" Her hand unconsciously brushed against the pouch in her jacket where the vial of golden blood was hidden. "This," she asked slowly. "You know what it is?" Rourke's expression didn't change. "We know more than you want to hear." "That blood," he stopped as another burst of gunfire echoed nearby. 2 hybrids appeared at the far end of the street, their glowing veins pulsing like molten lava. Rourke's men turned instantly, their weapons spitting bright blue arcs of energy that made the hybrids stagger but not fall. Evelyn's pulse raced. She had never seen anything slow them down before. "Get her in the truck," Rourke barked. Before she could protest, strong hands pulled her toward the nearest vehicle. The boy clung to her arm. "Him," she snapped. Rourke hesitated, then nodded to one of his men, who hauled the boy in after her. The doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. The truck lurched forward, bouncing over debris as it sped away from the firefight. Inside, Evelyn sat on a metal bench across from Rourke. The smell of gun oil and steel filled the air. He leaned forward, his gaze locking on hers. "That blood you're carrying isn't just from a hybrid, it's from the first hybrid. We call him Subject Zero. Everything out there," he said, jerking his chin toward the chaos outside, "came from him." Evelyn felt her stomach twist. "And the man I saw in the alley?" Rourke's jaw tightened. "That was Subject Zero." Her mind reeled. "He's alive, walking around, turning people into them. Not just turning," Rourke said grimly. "He's building an army. And now he's marked you." The boy spoke up for the first time, his voice small. "Rourke." He said she was part of him now. Rourke's eyes narrowed. Then we're already running out of time. The truck swerved sharply, and a soldier shouted from the front, "There, following." Evelyn grabbed the wall for balance as Rourke stood, slamming a fist against a panel. A hidden compartment slid open, revealing a strange metal case lined with frost. Inside, instead of weapons, were rows of small syringes filled with a dark, swirling liquid. Rourke pulled one out, his voice low but firm. "Evelyn, if what Subject Zero said is true, we can't risk waiting. This is the only thing that might keep you human. But once it's in youth, there's no going back." Her heart pounded as the truck shook under another impact, the sound of tearing metal filling her ears. Somewhere outside, the hybrids were gaining. She looked at the syringe, then at Rourke. "What happens if I refuse?" His answer was cold, certain, and left no room for hope. "Then you won't be Evelyn Cole for much longer."